Welcome to the All About Us podcast show, where we explore the ideas, experiences that shape families, communities, and the next generation. I'm your host, Carl Allen. Today's guest is Tim McCarthy, a parenting author and educator with a master's degree in education and a grandmaster rank in the martial arts. Tim brings together decades of experience as a classroom teacher, school administrator, and martial arts instructor. He has spent years studying developmental child psychology and translating complex research into clear, practical guidance for parents. His work blends Eastern and Western educational philosophy into what he calls four-dimension parenting, a framework designed to help children grow physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually in a world that often pulls them off balance. Tim, welcome back to the All About Us podcast. How are you doing today?
I am great and excited to be here.
Okay, well, let's delve into this. Foundations of four-dimensional parenting. What led you to develop the concept of four-dimension parenting?
Basically, it was my experience in the martial arts where we train physically, but also mentally. We have to remember certain techniques, certain patterns, certain forms. We train emotionally. We watch the children develop confidence, but actually adults develop confidence too. And finally, spiritually, basically that's morality. We don't attach the martial arts to any religion, but we do attach it to right and wrong. It's important to know how to punch someone, but it's more important to know when to punch someone and when not to punch someone. So in my years of teaching and writing about and developing programs for the martial arts, I learned, I understood, and embodied the four dimensions of human development. Along the way, one of the programs we developed was the after-school martial arts programs and the summer camp martial arts programs. You've probably seen signs all around your community about programs like that, especially in summer camp martial arts. You literally can't practice martial arts for 10 hours a day when you have the kids at work. It's too much. So you need other activities. And with my educational background, I added educational activities to the programs. So, of course, not all programs are created equal, but at least the ones we developed did have the educational background. And so when I retired, I said, this is such an amazing program for the development of children. How can I get this out to the general public, to the average parent? And so that's what I'm doing through interviews like this and through my book.
Okay. How did your experiences in both education and martial arts shape this whole entire frame?
Well, I am and always have been an educator. That was my degree. I spent the first few years, 10 years, as you mentioned, as a classroom teacher. So when I look at the martial arts, there's two parts. There's the martial and the art. I tend toward the art. I was never a champion fighter. I was a champion forms practitioner. Okay, so the art and the education in the martial arts is what inspired and excited me. And so as I got into these programs, as I worked for our company, I would help the other instructors who become, first of all, better businessmen. We would teach them how to keep their school open so they could continue to teach their students, but also how to become better teachers. They weren't just black belts with a certain ability to fight or grapple or do whatever their art taught them. They were also better equipped with our programs, with our guidance, to be better teachers so that the kids got more out of their programs than just the ability to fight. Especially in our programs, we tended to advertise to emphasize leadership development. We don't want to just create good fighters. We want to create good citizens who have leadership ability. When they're not fighting, they have the ability to get things done. They have the discipline, they have the work ethic, and they have the health to live a happy life.
When you talk about dimensions, what does that really mean to the parents of today?
All right. So again, there are four dimensions of human potential. We all have a body. We have a physical dimension. We all have a mind. That's the mental dimension. We all have a heart, which is the emotional dimension. And we all have a spirit, which is the spiritual dimension. If, for example, you don't believe in spirit, hopefully you believe in morality. And so what I call the spiritual dimension is the morality of right and wrong. And so if you want to raise a well-balanced child in my opinion, you need to consider all four dimensions of their potential and especially try to reach the child at their own level. A 2-year-old is very different than a 16-year-old. They have different thought processes, different emotions, different needs. And so trying to move them along the path of becoming better physically, mentally, emotionally, or spiritually takes different techniques, different input, different knowledge.
Why do you think modern parenting often focuses too heavily on one or two areas?
You do what you know, and you don't know what you don't know. So most parents know or have an idea how to be a parent. If they were fortunate enough to have good parents, then they do the same that their parents did. If they were unfortunate enough to have bad parents, they tend to do just the opposite of what their parents did without a clear direction of what's good. And so what I hope to do is help the parents, give them literally the instruction manual. You get one with your computer, you get one with your car, you don't get one with your kids. Well, I created the instruction manual with years of research in developmental psychology to know, based on research, what's happening to the child at each age. And then with my experience in the martial arts and education, what activities you can do to help your child advance at each age in each dimension.
The physical dimension. Why is physical development such a critical foundation for children?
Well, you develop your mind. You develop your body to develop your mind. The brain needs proper nutrients and proper circulation. So, physical education, physical dimension has two different aspects. You've got the building blocks and you've got the processes. Building blocks are the things you put in your body. Hopefully, that's food, water, healthy stuff. But a lot of people put in some garbage. You can't have a quality body without quality ingredients. You need those quality ingredients to get to your brain for it to develop properly. Plus, you need good circulation. And one of the best processes for good circulation is exercise. So teach your child from the beginning to enjoy movement. The joy of movement helps your child for a lifetime of positive exercise.
Okay. Okay. What role does, wait a minute, jumping, because we're still in physical, how does movement support learning and emotional regulation?
If you've ever tried to read anything for 3 or 4 hours, at least for me, I fall asleep. I need that circulation. When I'm upset, I've got these hormones that want to come out. Men have testosterone flowing through their body, needs to be dealt with. So exercise, physical activity helps get rid of that. If you're upset, go for a run, shoot some baskets, kick the soccer ball against the wall, dance. Try to get some of that anger, frustration out through physical movement. Burn up those hormones, much better emotionally. Likewise, mentally, if you want to maintain your focus, most people have a focus window of maybe 20 minutes. Then you need to get up, walk around, and then sit back down to study again. Develop your body, take care of your body to take care of your mind.
What mistakes do you commonly see parents make when it comes to physical development?
Most common mistake is probably not emphasizing that movement. I've got a neighbor and I love them because they always have their kids out in the yard. The biggest mistake you can make as a parent is sitting your child down in front of a tablet, a TV, and using it as a babysitter. Yeah, the kids will be quiet, almost hypnotized, but they're not learning. They're not developing the things they need to learn and develop. They're developing skills on a computer, and sometimes a 6-year-old is better on a computer than I am, but they're not developing the face-to-face understanding. What does it mean when my eyes do this? What does it mean when my eyes do that? That sort of understanding comes from face-to-face interaction.
How can parents support physical strength without turning childhood into pressure or competition?
Children, especially young children, love to do what their parents do. They look up to their parents. So if mom does yoga while watching a show on TV or does aerobics, watching a workout video anywhere on her phone, the child wants to participate, wants to be part of it. If you want to develop strength training in a child, okay, let's try it. Let's do a push-up. Watch this. This is a push-up. All right. Now, to keep it from getting competitive, You don't compare the child to his older brother or to anyone else. You compare the child to yesterday. Yesterday, we did 1 push-up. Let's see if we can do 2 today. All right. And so that's how you keep from getting competitive and burnout. And then you have to go with the child. The child may have this propensity, may be a child prodigy in gymnastics. If that's the case, you don't need to force them to practice. They're going to be doing cartwheels around the house. They're saying, Mom, take me to gymnastics. I want to go to gymnastics class. Can we go again tomorrow? Okay. Follow the child's lead. If they love the sport, the activity, help them be their coach. And if they want to play basketball, there are, Steph Curry videos online where you can find drills to become a better dribbler. You can become a better shooter. Be the child's coach, but don't push them farther than they want to go, especially at a young age. And basically, you can't relive your life through your child. If you wanted to
And a
be
lot of
a
people
major
do.
league baseball player and didn't practice hard enough to make it, don't try to force your child to become a major league baseball player if they don't want to be. Follow their lead. Find what they find interesting. Compare yesterday to today and try to get better at it and try to be their best coach. And even more importantly than their best coach, their best cheerleader.
Okay, let's step into the mental dimension. How do you define mental development beyond academics?
Well, fortunately, we have a pretty good school system. You put the kid on the bus, you take them to school, you drop them off. They learn how to read, they learn how to write, they learn mathematics, they learn history. So the school system is a pretty good system for mental development. But there are, just like in the physical dimension, where you have the building blocks and the processes, in the mental dimension, the building blocks are our thoughts, and the processes are the way we control or the way we use those thoughts. And so a lot of times you get into a mental loop where you keep thinking the same thing over and over, and you're worried about this and you're worried over and over and over about. That's a mental process that you can break by focusing on something else. And so what you choose to focus on helps you develop. And so as an adult, do I choose to watch pornography or do I choose to read scripture? That will affect my mental development and my spiritual development also, but my mental development, what my brain focuses on, what thoughts I allow into my brain, and what thoughts I repeat over and over again. And so children will sometimes get a fixation or an obsession. For a while as a child, I was obsessed with fishing. I guess I have an OCD personality. It then became basketball. Then it became the martial arts. So find something good for your child to focus on: music, sports, mathematics. It just depends on what their interest is and help develop it. Another thing you can do is develop what's called a growth mindset. People with a fixed mindset say things like, I'm just not good at math. I just can't lose weight. That is a fixed mindset. You can't do anything. It's fixed. A growth mindset is a mindset that says, I may have failed the test, but I can do better next time. And so you got to help your child realize that failure is not a judgment. You are not a bad person because you failed at something. You're a good person if you failed at something and you improved. Failure is a necessary step on improvement. So a growth mindset. Yes, I need to try stuff. I know I'm going to fail, but I'm going to get better at it. So instill that, and that's definitely beyond academics, what's taught in the school system.
Okay, what role does focus and discipline play in a child's growth?
Children tend to be unfocused, and that's fairly normal. A lot of children move towards ADD, attention deficit disorder. And so one of the things you can do is help them focus and understand they're going to have a very short attention span, 30 seconds to a minute. And so when you start on an activity that they like, stay with it to help them focus on it for as long as they're interested. And so if they can focus for a minute on playing catch, great. If they can focus for 2 minutes, let's see tomorrow if we can go for 3 minutes. And we don't need to tell them that we're expanding, we're going an extra minute or another. We just do it and see how long they stay interested. As far as discipline, learning to stay still, learning to stay quiet. This is one of the great things in martial arts. we usually start out with meditation. And so if they can sit still for 20, 30 seconds as a child, that's tremendous. And then as they get a little older, they can stay quiet for a minute, then 2 minutes, 5 minutes, eventually 15, 20-minute meditation. That's one way to develop focus. So it could be an activity, it could be a non-activity, but find something the child likes and help them stay with it longer and longer.
How can parents help children build resilience rather than just focus on achievement?
One of the main things is when you praise a child at a very early age, you develop their self-confidence by saying, "You're so smart. You're so pretty. You're so good looking. You're very strong. Look at that. You did one push-up. You're strong. Tomorrow, let's try to do two." That is performance. As they get a little older, you want to focus away from performance and focus on effort. They can't control the outcome. You can't control that you win every game. You can only control that you tried your best. You can control that you studied for the test. You can't control if you passed the test. If you failed the test, now you learned that you have to study more or study better. If you lost the game, you have to practice more so you can play better. And so that's one of the best things you can do is get them away from performance, focusing on performance to focusing on effort.
In what ways does martial arts training affect cognitive development?
You learn physical techniques. And so it's one thing to learn a list of vocabulary words. It's a different mental ability to memorize a sequence of steps in a grappling technique or a sequence of steps in a form. So most martial arts teach forms in addition to the self-defense. Many schools teach a curriculum of self-defense where what's self-defense technique number 1, number 2, number 3 for your belt rank. And so these are mental memory, teaching the body to remember, but usually the mind remembers it first and teaches the body. And then later, the body remembers it naturally so that when someone throws a punch at you, you don't think, is this self-defense number 1 or number 4? You just naturally react to what happened.
Okay, let's go into the emotional dimension here. Why do so many children struggle emotionally today?
Because unfortunately, parents don't know how to teach emotional maturity. I think it was the late 70s before they even started talking about emotional intelligence. Up to then, education was IQ, mental intelligence. You had a math score, you had a reading score. Later on, you had logic and those sort of things entered into the IQ tests. But nobody thought about EQ, emotional quotient, what they called emotional intelligence. Now I'm going to back away from that. Emotional intelligence is trying to squeeze a round peg into a square hole because intelligence is the realm of the mental dimension, and trying to squeeze emotions into the mental dimension just doesn't work. I mean, what is the logical description or the logical understanding of love? Love is an emotion. You have to understand it emotionally, not rationally. So it's not an intelligence, it's a feeling. And so the building blocks are your feelings, and the processes are the way you utilize those feelings and repeat them. So how do you get angry? Okay, somebody calls me a bad name, and that creates a feeling. But that feeling isn't the end of it. Now
Okay.
I have a thought about that feeling. Why, he shouldn't call me that. He has no right to call me that. That gives me another feeling. And then that feeling gives me another thought, and I'm getting ready to punch him in the mouth. So an emotion is a spiral of feeling, thought about the feeling, thought about the feeling, until you spiral yourself up into a frenzy, or you can literally spiral yourself down into a calm emotional reaction. Okay, so back to your question about parents. They don't understand emotional education. Excuse me again. There are specific steps to emotional education, the first being understanding your emotions. 2-year-olds have these temper tantrums, the terrible twos, because they suddenly have an emotion they didn't have as an infant. They just didn't experience it. It's a new emotion that happens at that age. And so you have to help them identify it. You're feeling angry. Is that what that feeling is? You're feeling happy. That's what that feeling is. And you start naming the emotions so they have a tool to deal with it. Now you can talk about it because they understand that word means that feeling. And especially with violent emotions, you name it to tame it. Once you realize you're angry, you can do something about it. So the next step, once you identify your emotions, is to manage your emotions. How do you manage your emotions? One of the things we teach toddlers and preschoolers is a little game called the opposites. So play with me, please, Carl. What's the opposite of angry?
Calm.
And what's the opposite of happy?
Sad.
Right. And so first we establish that. Okay, so now we can name our emotions and we know the opposites. Then we play a little game called I'm going to be. So, Carl, if you feel angry, what do you want to be?
I want to be happy or feel better.
Right. If you feel sad, what do you want to be?
I want to be happy.
Right. Okay, so we play that game over and over. Then one day, Carl gets really mad. Well, I'm so angry. You're angry. But what do you want to be? I want to be happy.
Calm. Calm.
Calm.
Yeah, happy.
Right? So it helps them change their emotion, helps them manage their emotions. And so that's some very basic steps for toddlers. As they get older, they learn to motivate themselves, which is part of managing your emotions, recognize emotions in others, which leads to leadership skills into the adolescent and adult stages. So basically, you don't know what you don't know. So if parents don't know these emotional steps to emotional maturity, they really can't teach them to their child or help the child develop. So they have to have a resource for that.
Okay. What is the difference between emotional strength and emotional suppression?
Did you say suppression with an S?
Yes, suppression.
Well, when you suppress something, much like a balloon, you push it down in one place and it's going to go out in another place. So emotional strength is being able to handle the emotion. Emotional suppression is pushing it down inside and waiting for it to pop up somewhere else.
And
So
that's not
definitely we
good.
don't want to suppress our emotions. We want to handle them.
Correct.
But handling emotions, for example, what do you do when you're angry? The classic way to handle it, before you say anything, count to 10. Okay, so what does that do? Inside your brain, there's a little piece called the amygdala, and that's your emotional response. And so if something happens very dangerous, like a lion jumps out of the brush, your amygdala takes over, gets you to fight or flight. Now, if Carl calls me a bad name, that's not necessarily a fight or flight. And if I let my amygdala react, I may want to punch you in the mouth. If I count to 10, that moves me into the prefrontal cortex, the logical part of my brain. And so by the time I get to 10, I'm not reacting as if you're a lion attacking me. I'm reacting as a logical person, and I can say, what does he mean by that? Why is he saying that? Did I do something silly? Did I do something wrong? Should I apologize? Or maybe if we go on beyond that to the spiritual dimension, maybe he's having a bad day. Maybe he's feeling bad. How can I help him feel better? So that's a big difference between taking action and suppression.
How can families model emotional balance in the home?
Literally by modeling. And so much like a parent who says, don't smoke, smoking is bad for you. I don't want you to grow up like me. Kids grow up
Right.
smoking because they do what they see. Likewise, stop yelling. I hate it when you yell. Well, you yell. Why can't I yell? And so
Exactly.
modeling is the key to emotional behavior. And so sometimes when you lose it, the best thing to do is afterwards say, hey, Carl, I'm sorry I lost it. That's not a good way to act. I really should have done this or that instead. And at least you model how to repair, which is to apologize and then to identify the things you should have done instead so that next time you have a better chance of handling it. And so everybody has emotional problems, emotional breakdowns. Try to hide them from the kids if you can, especially if they're things that the kids shouldn't be part of. But when they see it, help them understand what happened, why it happened, what could have been done better about it.
Okay, the spiritual dimension. When you talk about spiritual development, what are you actually referring to?
Literally, spiritual development. If you have a religion, there are probably steps in your religion that at a certain age, you go through this ceremony. At a certain age, you go through that ceremony. And there are ceremonies upon ceremonies, whatever your religion is, because people who are wiser than me developed those systems to help you develop spiritually. If you are irreligious, if you don't have a religion, hopefully you have a morality. And there are steps researched by the psychologist Lawrence Kohlberg of specific steps along the path to develop a morality that coincide pretty well with what the great religious teachers taught us. So at a very early age, it's punishment and reward. When a toddler does something bad, you have to punish him. Your explanations are going to go right over his head. He just doesn't understand what you're saying. So you do that, you sit in timeout. I'm not a big fan of corporal punishment, but one case that has an argument in its favor, if the child hits you and you hit him back in a way, that helps him realize that that hurts. Bang, I get hit. Oh, that hurts mommy or that hurts daddy. What does that mean? It hurts daddy. Bap. That's what it feels like. That's not nice. Don't do that to people.
Correct.
Most psychologists will say, do not use corporal punishment. Do not strike the child. I can't argue with that. My father spanked me. I think I turned out pretty
That's
well.
what my parents did. That's what
Yep.
my parents did too. That's what I did to my children. I did not nowhere near what was done to me. I think I
Yeah.
probably did like 20% of what my parents did to me. So
Well, let me introduce a concept called minimum consequences. And what that means is you don't use a bazooka to kill flies. You use a fly swatter.
exactly.
And
Right.
so if your child will stop when you go and you give that look, and believe me, some
That's
mothers
enough.
have that look, then if that's all it takes, that's punishment. That's it. It worked. That's the minimum consequence. It worked. Kids require more than a look, might require a word, might require a raised voice, might have to go into timeout. So you use the appropriate consequence and something appropriate. Okay, so you don't, when I said slapping is an appropriate response where you do that to me, I do that to you, now you know how it feels. If
Right.
you steal something and get slapped in the face, but what's the connection? Okay,
There is none.
yeah, so it has to be an appropriate response and an appropriate level.
Why is the spiritual dimension often overlooked or misunderstood?
This is a big problem I have with science and the scientific method. One day, somebody discovered that an antibacterial pill will stop a fever. And it works. You have a bacterial infection, you take an antibacterial pill, you're healed. Does that mean there's a pill for everything? No. Appropriate tool for the appropriate job. So medicine right now is trying to find the pill to cure everything. And in the meantime, they put out all these drugs that have side effects and don't necessarily cure what they advertise they will. Likewise, logic and the scientific method. Well, if logic solves some problems, does it necessarily solve all problems? And it's in itself is a logical fallacy. It doesn't work that way. And so if you're trying to solve a math problem, you need math skills. If you're trying to solve an emotional problem, then you need emotional skills and emotional solutions, not logic. If you've ever tried to talk to somebody who's upset with logic, it doesn't work. You've got to reach them on an emotional level. So the question you asked, spiritually, if you try to address spiritualism or spirituality with logic and with science, it doesn't work because the rules are different. Okay. You talk to spiritual leaders, they're meditating, they're praying, they will teach you spiritual truths that are not logical. And if you tell them logical reasons for things, they may say, but that doesn't make sense spiritually. So to me, they're separate dimensions. And so they have separate rules. And that's why a lot of people don't understand how to help people grow spiritually if they don't have a good spiritual background. I fall back on your family's religion, whatever that is. I'm not going to put mine on yours, but don't have a religion, then what are your family's rules of morality? What is right and wrong? If you say it, you do it. If you promise it, you deliver it. Those sort of rules of morality that you can develop even if you don't have a religion.
Good. How can parents nurture meaning, values, and purpose without imposing a belief system?
That is how you teach, is you teach a system. So in the martial arts, and you go to Taekwondo, they teach you how to kick. You go to Judo, they teach you how to grapple. So you start with by learning a system that somebody knows. You can't learn about emotions without knowing this is anger and this is a joy. So you start with a system, whatever system you have that you found successful, your family's religion, your own personal code of ethics. Just understand that in the preteen or the teen years, your child will start to question the foundations of those beliefs. And so you need to have someone or something to help back them up. But in anything, I'm a writer. What did I do? First, I learned my vocabulary. I learned to write. I learned to type. I studied great writers. I learned from people who write about the things I want to write about. And then eventually, I developed my own style, my own voice, and my own material. But that doesn't happen at 2, at 4, at 10. So you teach the child a system that you feel, that you believe, and we're talking spiritual. Spiritual is the realm of belief, not feeling, not logic, belief. And so you teach a system you believe, and then as the child grows, help them grow in their belief.
Okay, what practices help children feel grounded and connected in today's world?
Children love consistency. And so you develop a morning routine. When you get out of bed, you eat your breakfast, you brush your teeth, you comb your hair, you get dressed, you get your books, and you go to school. When you come home, you go out and play or you do your homework, whichever works best for your family. And then you come back after your homework, you go out and play, or after you play, you come back and do your homework. Okay. You help with dinner. You clean the table, you clean the dishes. At night, you say your prayers and you say, thank you, God, for this that happened today. Back up. My family doesn't pray. Still, at the end of the day, you say to your child, tell me what are the good things that happened today. And you go over the good things to develop an attitude of gratitude. And who in our life can we be thankful for? What about grandma, grandpa, Uncle Bill, Aunt Mary? And develop the attitude of gratitude, whether it's prayer or whether it's just gratitude, that is a place to stay grounded. So the consistency in anything, when I teach a class, I teach a consistency. We have a warm-up, then we present something new, then we practice that new thing, then we review it. So with your child, have a routine that they follow. Every day add something new and exciting. Go to the park, pick up a new sport, watch something new together on TV or on the internet. But again, limit the screen time. And then at the end of the day, practice your gratitude. Review what you've learned. And then as the child grows older, set a mindset. How do you want to feel when you wake up tomorrow? What do we want to do tomorrow to make it better than today? So those are ways to help your child be grounded in routine.
Okay, I'm going to talk about balance across all 4 dimensions right now. How do these 4 dimensions support each other when they are properly in balance?
You want to be a balanced person, yet each person will have their favorite. And so what you want to prevent your child from doing is becoming a cartoon. You don't want to grow up. You don't want to grow up to be a jock who is the greatest football player and can't solve a basic math problem, who doesn't know how to talk to girls, who can't tell the difference between right and wrong. So as a senior, he throws the freshmen into mud puddles. Okay?
Right.
You don't want to become a nerd where you're a math whiz or a science whiz, but you can't relate to the opposite sex and you don't have physical health. You're weak. Excuse me again. So you want to have a balance. So you want to have that joy of movement in yourself to model to the child, something physical you enjoy doing. Try to instill that joy in your child. You want to instill a love of learning. What new can we learn today? How can we make it better than yesterday? The feelings. How can I feel better? How can I experience more love? How can I experience more joy in my life? How can I help other people experience more joy in their lives? And then, of course, spiritually or morally, how can I do more good in the world? Not so much as I grow old, how can I make more money, but how can I help more people? Model that kind of
What
behavior
okay.
and talk about it with your child.
Okay. What happens when one dimension is neglected for far too long?
It rebels. And I
Mm,
talked about the cartoons of people who emphasize one dimension over another. If
mhm.
you go the opposite and you neglect your physical dimension, basically you die early. If you neglect your mental dimension, if you think education is important, try ignorance. That's very
Mm,
expensive. Ignorance is much more expensive
wow.
than education. Emotionally, if you neglect your emotions, sooner or later they're going to pop out like that balloon. Unfortunately, it may be an anger or a negative emotion. So you want to try to encourage or develop the positive emotions. And spiritually, if you keep going down a path of evil, you will have evil done to you. You live by the sword, you die by the sword, and you will probably either go to jail or die early.
Very eye opening. I like this part. How can parents recognize imbalance early?
Just the same, um, the Indians in India say that we all live in 4 rooms: the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. And you want to spend time in each room each day. And so with your child, you want to spend that time in each room each day. So that's how you recognize an imbalance early is you come in, you literally think about the day. Are we going to do something physical today, mental today, emotional today, spiritual today? And again, we live a life of habits. So set up patterns, habits for your child so that when they go to school, they learn something, of course. When they come home, they need to have some kind of structured or unstructured playtime to run around and have fun. Homework, mental, emotional. What happened at school today? Tell me, oh, nothing. Tell me something weird that happened at school today. What do you mean weird? I don't know, just something out of the ordinary. What did one of your friends do? And they tell you the story. Okay, how did that make you feel? All right, you felt bad. What would you do if you were that person? What would you do differently? How could that person have done that differently to get a better result? And so now we're talking about emotional maturity and possibly even spiritual maturity. Did that person do something right or wrong? How could they have done it better?
What does a balanced child look like in real life?
An avatar, something that's unreal. It is the scholar athlete who dates the cheerleader and goes to church every Sunday and helps with feed the poor on the weekends.
One of those few people we rarely run into to seem to have it all, then, basically.
Yes, yes.
Okay, we're going into that part of the show called flip mode, where you get to ask me 3 questions. So now I'm awaiting your question.
All right. So, what's our audience here? What is your audience for this
Well,
podcast?
that is strange because this is out of my my nonprofit called Stand Up and Do Something. And it's a social justice nonprofit, but it's a social justice nonprofit for all people. When we went through a lot of the things in 2020s, you had Black Lives Matter and a few of these other groups that kind of catered to one race or one culture or one belief system. I wanted to bring something where everybody was incorporated and together and where we would share our cultural experiences, our successes, our stories, so we could bring the world together, so we could get rid of the divisiveness and see that we had more in common than what we have that are different or far apart from each other.
Basically, we're stronger together.
We're stronger together, actually. And that is how, they take control of society. They create division and they have us fighting each other while they take and they hoard the wealth.
Absolutely. All right. So you've got a nonprofit. How has that been going?
Well, first we went through COVID. We went through COVID and, nonprofit funding went to zero. But, my nonprofit wasn't, totally sufficient on grants. My nonprofit was also a federal contractor. Well, then guess what happened? Trump came into office and they removed like 90% of the grants and federal contracts. Things are starting to come back now, and it's coming back slowly, but we're still here. So, a lot of nonprofits, I'd say, if I had to guess, between 2020 and now, we probably lost 60% of the nonprofits that were out there. So it's been very much just a double blow of COVID, and then what happened with Doge and cutting, and they just didn't cut USAID. They cut a lot of stuff, and now we're starting to, reap the. I don't want to say the benefits of all of that, but they're starting to see a lot of the problems all of that caused. Next question.
All right. Well, now that you've heard my spiel about the 4 dimensions of human potential, how is that going to affect you in the future and your nonprofit?
Definitely is going to affect my nonprofit, because when I get to Puerto Rico, I'm setting up what I call I find and youth fine and cultural arts center. And there's just not a lot of resources there for children. I want to get them into sculpting, painting, some of them music, learning how to fly drones. We're just going to have a smorgasbord of different things to expose children, and we're going to have them grouped by age from like 6 to 8, 9 to 10 or 11, and then 12 to 15, and then 16, 17, and 18. And so having this knowledge and this foundation and dealing with youth is definitely going to help my nonprofit with this youth cultural arts, and fine arts center and daycare. It's also going to be a daycare center. So,
Well, given
okay,
that,
let's
let
go.
me let me let me
Go
make an
ahead.
offer for you.
Okay.
When we are done, I will send you a copy of my book, which has not
Okay.
only the 4 dimensions for each age group, so you can understand them a little more clearly,
Wow.
but over 400 activities you can use with the kids spread out by age group, by dimension. So when we're
Thank
done with
you.
this, I will
Thank
email
you.
that over to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And for anybody
Practical
who's listening,
applic.
you can get a copy
Go
of
ahead.
it at d-2d.com. D as in dimension. d-2d.com. You can get a copy of the book for under $5. You can get a copy of the chapter for your child for under $1. So you can
Great.
afford to have a 4-dimensional child.
Great, great, great. Let's talk about practical application for parents. How can parents start applying 4-dimensional parenting without feeling overwhelmed?
Again, get the education. And so
Get the
I
book.
broke it down, but you don't need a degree in education. You don't need a degree in psychology. All you need is me.
Okay. What simple daily habits make the best difference over time?
Consistency, probably. Balance, again, having some physical activity, mental activity, emotional discussions and emotional time together, and then moral discussions. What's right, what's wrong over time.
How should activities change as children grow older?
Basically, they need to become more sophisticated. You need to adapt to the child's abilities. As I said, a 2-year-old has these temper tantrums because they have new emotions that they're experiencing. Guess what? An adolescent has new emotions, not really new emotions, but new depths of emotion that are causing basically the same tantrums. And so when your teenage daughter says, nobody has ever loved as deeply as I have, probably not. They probably have loved as deeply as you or more, but you've never loved as deeply as you have before. It's a new experience. Let me help you understand that feeling and how to deal with it. And yeah, again, it depends on the age and what they're capable of understanding and what they're capable of doing. A 2-year-old, when he gets upset, throws a temper tantrum, maybe breaks something in the house. A teenager, when she gets upset and throws a temper tantrum, could crash the car and die. So you've got to take that all into consideration. They're not only what they're capable of, but what capable of understanding, but capable of doing.
What role does consistency play in long-term development?
We are creatures of habit. I've had one psychologist estimate that somewhere around 42 to 46% of what we do every day is habit. And I am a creature of habit. I intentionally schedule things because at my age, I forget. So I don't want to forget to do something. I just make it a habit and I do it naturally. So
You
habit
forget, and I'm a
consistency.
procrastinator.
Yeah.
Okay, parenting in an unbalanced world. What challenges do modern parents face that previous generations did not? The internet.
Yes, the internet. And the internet is the greatest tool, but tools are there to make things happen faster. One of my teachers, my grandmaster, said money is not the root of all evil. Money is just a tool. If you have money and you're good, you do a lot of good with it. If you are evil, you do a lot of evil with it. Likewise, the internet is a tool. It is the greatest library. When I was a kid, if I wanted to learn something, I could read it out of the encyclopedia, somebody else's digested summary of that knowledge, or I could drive to a library, look in the card catalog, try to find one of the few books in the world that they have on it in the stacks, check out the book and learn. Now I do a Google search and I have access to Harvard, MIT. Unbelievable.
Everything.
Everything.
The amount of knowledge you have access to now is phenomenal at your fingertips.
And yet people spend their days watching cat videos.
Right, exactly. How can parents protect children from overload without isolating them from the world?
Isolate them from the internet. The American Society of Pediatrics says limited or no access to screens until 18 months. And then at 18 months, maybe a supervised hour a day. And so that leaves 23 hours a day to get healthy outside the internet when they're young. Again, supervised. If you let them watch TV, even educational TV probably has a commercial by one of the cereal companies that tells them they should drink or eat sugary foods. You're better off if you have educational TV and paying to not have advertisements shown on it. Limit screen time. As they get older, screen time includes work time, doing homework, and then you have to limit the playtime.
What advice do you give parents who feel they are falling behind?
Catch up. Okay, we just talked about how great the internet is. Spend some of your time instead of watching the next episode of your favorite TV show. Do a little research on better parenting. Look up
Right,
four-dimensional
right, right.
parenting. Look up permissive
Resources,
parenting.
your
Look up
book. And there's all type of resources available now. People have a whole lot less excuses for not being able to accomplish the things they'd like to. Let's hit our closing reflections here. What has teaching and parenting taught you personally?
It's taught me to always question if I might be wrong. Okay. I'm a conservative. I have very strong opinions, but I also always question that I might be wrong. And so every time I meet a new person, I learn something new, whether that's a child or an adult. So, and it could be physically, I learn from them, mentally, emotionally, or spiritually, or all. So, yes, that's what it's
Okay.
taught me to be a lifelong learner.
Okay. If parents could remember just one principle from your work, what should it be?
You are not the star of your child's life. You are the coach. They are the star of their life. You are the coach. You can't do everything for them. You can't have them relive your life as you would have liked it. You offer
Right.
them
Live
advice. You
vicariously
let them
through
make
them.
mistakes.
Yeah. And finally, what does raising a truly balanced child mean to you?
It means a brighter future for us all. How many fully balanced people do you know? If we can start a generation of them and then they create another generation of balanced children, just think of the world we could have in 2 or 3 generations.
I agree. I agree. I agree. Tim, I want you to tell my listeners in the world out here, how do they get in contact with you and how do they get your resources?
All right. So the best way to find me, you can go to LinkedIn or Facebook. Unfortunately, my Facebook, I can't answer you. Instagram, I can. Instagram, D Parents. YouTube, D Parents. At 4D Parents, you can see videos. You can see posts, link to articles. But really, my book is, as I said earlier, the instruction manual you didn't get with your child. You don't need a degree in psychology. You don't need a degree in education. I boil it down for you in simple language, age appropriate, with age appropriate activities, under $5 at D as in dimension. For
all my listeners, all the links are always on our promos and show links. So they'll be readily available for you. Just find the show and the information's there. Tim, thank you so much for sharing your insight and offering parents a grounded, thoughtful approach to raising children in a complex world today. Your work reminds us that balance is not a destination, but a daily practice. To our listener, Tim McCarthy's writing and teachings offer a clear and steady guide for nurturing children across every dimension of their growth. This has been the All About Us podcast, where we explore the ideas that shape families and the wisdom that carries us forward. Until next time, stay present, stay intentional, and keep growing together. Have a great day.